Hello, all you Washington Times subscribers. Welcome to the Washington Times countdown to the midterms. We're less than a week away, or we're just a week away from the midterm elections. My name is Kelly Sadler, and I'm the commentary editor here at the Washington Times.
And I am Cheryl, Chumley, online opinion editor at the Washington Times. So happy to have you with us.
So happy to have you with us. We're going to have a slate of guests appear this hour. And if you have any questions, please submit them online, and we'll be sure to address them with our guests. So Cheryl, there's a new Trafalgar poll, and Robert is going to be appearing on our podcast here shortly. But a new Trafalgar poll that came out today saying 50.2% of likely voters believe that Republicans are going to win both chambers of both the Senate and the House, and that 80% think that Republicans are going to take one chamber. Only 19.5% of people believe that Democrats are going to keep both chambers of the House and the Senate. So, kind of, what are your predictions moving forward to November?
Right. I mean, it's an interesting poll, right?
Yes.
Because it kind of, instead of just going for the horse races of how they're doing on the ground, it kind of captures the tone of the nation.
Yeah.
And I actually think that it's probably one of the more realistic polls out there. I actually think that there's going to be a red wave.
Mm-hmm.
I think Republicans are going to come up doing very well in a week, and I think they're going to have control of both House and Senate.
I do too. I believe that too. And I think that there's a likelihood we get 52 seats in the Senate. I've been speaking with a lot of people, and they believe that the races to look at are Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. And if we win 2 out of those 3 senatorial races, then we're going to win control of the Senate. And so far, all of those races are within the margin of error, where you have Adam Laxalt in Nevada actually polling ahead of and that's largely because of the Hispanic vote in Nevada, and that Hispanics are trending more toward the Republican Party.
And, Joe Biden polls from a couple months ago showed that not only Hispanics were leaving the Democrat Party, but white women, younger voters, which sort of put him across the finish line a couple years ago. And this all bears poorly for Democrats. They're not even reaching their base voters, never mind reaching out to that independent bloc that both sides need to win.
Well, on the same Trafalgar poll, it said that 65.9% of likely voters believe that President Biden and the Democrats in general, quote, have not made a strong enough case as to why Democratic candidates should earn voter support in the 2022 midterms. So they're not making an argument. They're talking about things like abortion. They're talking about things like a threat to democracy, January 6th. None of these things are registering with the voters' number one concern. And it's been, voters have cared about the inflation in the economy. That's been their number one concern for months and months and months and months. And Democrats can read these polls too, but they've refused to actually address the issues, the kitchen table issues that's impacting most people.
Well, it's funny the wording of that have not made the case, because that's such a nice way of saying that Democrats are just failing on every on every item of concern to American citizens, and you just lay them out. And instead, they're focusing on these fundraising type issues for their base: abortion, climate change, ridiculous social justice and equity programs. You've got Kamala Harris out there applauding electric buses and talking about those 3 circles, the vector or whatever it is. And I mean, they are completely missing the mark on what Americans are concerned about right now. And number one, as always, it's the economy.
Yeah, it's the economy. It's also crime. Mm-hmm. And when you have the New York governor's race is a lot tighter than a lot of people expected. And it's because Lee Zeldin, the Republican, have been hitting the issue of crime. And when you have Kathy Hochul enter a debate last week and say that crime is kind of made up, it doesn't really concern voters, that is a slap in the face of New Yorkers who are scared to go on the subway in New York City, who are scared of getting assaulted. Crime in New York City has spiked 31% a year over year. And this is a reality for these voters. It's not something that's a made up fiction. It almost reminded me of Terry McAuliffe, the Virginia gubernatorial candidate last year, when he said that education wasn't an issue for parents and parents shouldn't have control of their child's education. And so I think it could be a winning issue for Zeldin, and I think he could pull it out Tuesday.
It's funny you brought up Terry McCullough because while you were detailing that, I was thinking exactly of that particular instance. And living in Virginia as I do, I
Yeah.
saw firsthand how parents just sat up and said, "What did he say?" And it energized them. And it's not just parents right now that are energized to get out there and vote. Parents, both Democrat and Republican, care about their kids, and so they're looking for those middle ground candidates, the more moderate ones, which Democrats, by no imagination, represent moderate middle ground now. So I think that Republicans, even though polls are trending toward them, I think that they're going to have much wider margin wins in a week than even polls are showing.
Yeah, I've talked to some of my friends who are on these campaigns, and they're seeing a real shift in the ground movement as along with enthusiasm among
Yes.
Republican voters, because it's going to be about turnout on Monday, and Republicans are excited to go out and vote. One of the things that the estimates are anywhere from like 22 pickups in the House to 30 plus. 30 plus would be a tsunami, a red tsunami. It would give Republicans not just they'd outnumber what Pelosi has right now in terms of majority. So they'd actually be able to legislate and to govern.
Right.
Do you think that if this red wave comes, both in the House and Senate, do you think the Biden administration will pivot to the center and work with Republicans for the last 2 years of his term?
No, if Joe Biden were actually leading in the White House, I think that maybe a case could be made that he might be doing it, right? But Joe Biden is a puppet president. He's someone who has allowed the far leftist influences to just steamroll over any sort of constitutional agenda. And so what's going to happen when the red wave comes and Joe Biden it would seem like he would have to work with the Republican Party. He's just going to go merrily along and read the bullet points and speak the speeches that his speechwriters give him from the podium, and he's going to dig down on attacking the MAGA-type Republicans.
Well, I mean, it'll be such a repudiation of his governing. You had Bill Clinton in the 90s after a shellacking came to him in the midterms, pivot to the center and work with Newt Gingrich. And then won re-election he won re-election because of his pivot to the middle, the declaration that the big government era is over. Barack Obama also took a shellacking, his own words, in the midterms. His rhetoric toned down, but his governing, he didn't pivot to the center, right? I don't know with Biden. I do not know, but I know that Republicans, if they win, they are going to have to pass some bills to get it on Joe Biden's desk. And if Joe Biden vetoes those bills, then the American public, it'll be made clear to the American public what the Biden administration represents and what a contrast with the kind of the Republican. But Republicans can't just win
Right.
and then sit back and do nothing.
Right.
I don't.
Work with
Yeah,
Democrats.
I don't.
Yeah.
I just don't think that is what voters want.
No, they don't. And I just don't see Joe Biden reaching out in any way to work with Republicans at any time, no matter how majority the Republicans hold the House and Senate. Because if you look at the tone of the nation now, the Democrat Party under Bill Clinton, the Democrat Party didn't hate America. They actually tried to do things that were decent for America, specifically the economy, right? These Democrats, beginning under Barack Obama, so far left from anything we've seen in recent history, have carried on that same sort of socialist Marxist agenda through this White House. And with the media in the camp carrying water for the Democrat Party, why would Joe Biden have to work with Republicans? The media will just cover everything for him. So I just see, if we even get through this election without having a month worth of legal challenges, I just see Joe Biden picking up where he's at now.
Well, I mean, the Biden agenda is so unpopular that you've got President Biden vacationing in Delaware, right? He's not on the campaign trail at all. You have Barack Obama going out there to try to garner some enthusiasm in some of these tight races. He's in Nevada and will be in Arizona this week and doing rallies. And then he's going to do a rally with Joe Biden, I think, at the end of the week in Pennsylvania. Because Democrats really view Pennsylvania as a potential pickup seat. What do you think of that senatorial race, as well as gubernatorial race? You have Shapiro for the governorship that's leading Mastriano by double digits in some polls. But
Right.
you've got Fetterman and Oz neck and neck.
Yeah, I actually think the polls for Fetterman and Oz are calling it too tight. I really think they're doing underpolling of conservatives like they always do. It's very difficult to look at that Fetterman-Oz debate and conclude that Americans actually think Fetterman could do a good job as senator.
Speaking of which, I think we've got a clip of that debate for our viewers.
As lieutenant governor, you're running for a seat that could decide the balance of power in Washington. What qualifies you to be a U.S. senator? You have 60 seconds.
Hi, good night, everybody. I'm running to serve Pennsylvania. He's running to use Pennsylvania.
I mean,
I don't even know.
but to your point about the media carrying water for these Democrats,
Right.
the Fetterman campaign had embeds of reporters that were with him on a daily basis after his stroke and on the campaign trail, and none of them pointed out how bad his actual condition was to the voters. Fetterman's been having a basement campaign, much like Joe Biden, and the one reporter who did say they had trouble doing small talk prior to the interview, and he had comprehension issues, got called out by her colleagues for being honest.
Right. Well, it's on display for voters to see. So if Pennsylvania were to pick Fetterman over Oz, shame on Pennsylvania, right? I don't see how most Americans could vote for this guy after watching that very painful debate. And very sad debate, too, because maybe we conservatives don't reach out enough to show sympathy for somebody in that position, but my sympathies for Fetterman right now, the fact that he's being exploited by his own party just for a simple political seat, it's shameful, but there we are, and the correct pick is Oz, really, but I think Oz is going to win by at least a couple percentage points. I actually think polls are just pulling him.
Yeah. Well, I'm concerned about the early vote in Pennsylvania, and the fact that this debate came so late, as a lot of people voted prior to even watching the debate. But there was an interesting endorsement for Oz from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, saying, and the editorial board basically endorsed him, saying, better bet, despite turbulent Senate race, Oz better prepared to lead. Now, this is coming from a Democratic paper, really, I think is calling it fair. But do these endorsements even matter? Do paper endorsements matter anymore? Do debates matter anymore?
Right. Well, without a doubt, I think the debate this time around matters because it wasn't a show of equal candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, one was far better, even at holding his own speaking than the other. As far as newspaper endorsements, honestly, I don't think they matter. And just from a matter of principle, I've been a long time opponent of newspapers, even taking a stand on candidates, especially when they cover politics as part of their daily curriculum.
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't think average Americans say, oh, look, my newspaper endorsed candidate A, not B, so I'm going to vote for candidate A.
Well, on the other side of that, it was the Philadelphia Inquirer who endorsed Fetterman early on, and then mind-blowing after the debate last week, said that Fetterman did a better job in the debate than Oz. And it's just so transparent that these quote-unquote journalists are not journalists, they're activists. And they'll do anything to see the Democrats pull out a victory. Even we all watched that debate with our own eyes. We listened with our own ears. And you can't tell me the sky is, red and heavy believe it, right? But that's what a lot of these journalists on the campaign trail have been doing.
But don't you think most Americans at this point in time are aware that the media just leans left and the media will carry water for Democrats no matter how ridiculous the Democrats are or what kind of lies they're openly trying to sell?
Well, and that's the other thing. Like, if you watch the Sunday shows, election deniers and threats to democracy are almost their sole focus on what should matter when people go to the voting booth on Tuesday. I don't see this registering in any poll that I've seen. I mean, how is this helpful to them?
Right. I don't have a good answer for that. I think it's just pushing an agenda, right? It's that far left playbook that if you repeat something enough times, people will start to believe it. And I think that's how the Democrats and the press are working.
Well, it was funny because NBC did do a poll and they said that a threat to democracy was one of the number one issues. But if you look at the respondents, Republicans put threat to democracy as the number one issue, but not for the reasons that the Democrats did, right? They're like,
Right.
if we elect you, you're going to blow up the filibuster. You're going to add additional states to the United States. Look at the threats against the Supreme Court coming from the left, an assassination attempt on Kavanaugh. You are out to destroy democratic norms as we know them. So yes, we view that as our number one concern. Whereas Democrats are just like, I feel like if they're only Joe Biden is pulling so low, and they don't have a platform to run on. So I think why they're doing this is like elect who you know, the devil you do know, because the guy who's challenging you is even worse or even more radical than the ones that's holding office.
Right. But remember, Hillary Clinton tried to run on that. And, you know, Democrats need principles upon which to stand and run, but they don't. So everything that they campaign on is attack Republicans, attack Trump, even though Trump is he's not on the ballot, but try and draw parallels between all the Republican candidates to Trump so they can all go down in this flame. And it's just not working for Democrats, especially when you have open borders, when you have crime surging, and you have people struggling to fill their gas pumps.
Yeah, no. And when you brought up election deniers and the demonization, it is so funny. Hillary Clinton, or what was it last week, coming out on TV and saying that this election could the right is trying to rig this election and like that you started this election denialism by saying that Trump was an illegitimate president in 2016, and started this trend. And then you have Stacey Abrams, who lost to Kemp in a gubernatorial contest, never conceded.
Nope, still not.
Still not conceding.
Yep, in her mind, she's still governing.
But for some reason, the media excuses that rhetoric, and that's not election denialism, but questioning the results of the 2020 election are.
That's why Democrats can get by with what they do, because they have the media counting water for them. They have the media selling them out.
Yep.
So they're allowed to lie. They're allowed to deceive.
All right. Well, I guess we've got our first guest. He's been on the campaign trail before, knows a lot about it. Mike Huckabee, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. We had a little bit of a technical glitch, but I'm glad we were able to connect and delighted to be with you.
You're going to treat us to some guitar playing? I see you have something in the background there.
Yeah, I'm in my music room. I've got quite a collection of guitars behind me, but a lot of stories, but we don't have time for that. I wish we did because it's some pretty cool stuff back there.
So let's talk about the midterms. What are you looking at and seeing?
I think we're going to see a blowout, and I know that's kind of going out on a limb, but all the signs point to Republicans having the best night of their history, I think, in a midterm. And the reason I say that is because I'm watching some things where we shouldn't even be in play. I don't know that we're going to win the Connecticut Senate race, but the fact that Blumenthal is in trouble. Same thing in Washington State. I think without a doubt we're going to win in places like Arizona. Going to see the pickup of the Senate seat in Georgia. J.D. Vance will win in Ohio. And part of the problem Democrats have, they don't have a message. They got nothing. All they can say is, gee, hadn't it been great since we opened the border, shut down energy, doubled your gas prices, made it almost impossible for you to buy bread, bacon, butter, and beans unless you sell a kidney at the grocery store to pay for it. And by the way, don't leave your house because there's a good chance you'll get knocked in the head by a brick by some stranger who will be out of jail before you get out of the hospital. So vote for us. We'll keep doing what we're doing. I just don't think they've got a message. And people, even hardcore Democrats who have their brains still connected, are thinking the Republicans couldn't do worse than these guys. Let's give them a shot.
So Cheryl and I were talking about this a bit earlier. Let's say there is a red wave, a red tsunami come next week. Do you see President Biden pivoting to the middle, like a la Bill Clinton? Or Do you see him working with Republicans who might have both chambers of Congress? Or is he still going to push through, try to push through as much of his radical agenda through executive orders?
I think he'll push through his agenda as much as he can, and I hope the Republicans have the guts to stand and fight. I hope they'll take him to court for unconstitutional power grabs that he does not have the authority to do. I never understood why the Republicans allowed Obama to go through that whole "I've got a pen and a phone" stuff. The Constitution makes it very clear what a president can and cannot do. My gosh, when I was a governor in the executive branch, I would have loved to tell the legislature just to go pound sand, but it didn't work like that. And I never thought it would be appropriate if I could just pull it off. So I'd love to believe that Joe Biden would have that kind of moment, as Bill Clinton did. But Bill Clinton, at his heart, was and is a pragmatist. He understood that there are certain things government ought to do, and he was more interested in getting those things done and having some achievement than he was just being an ideologue. He's very different than his wife on that count. Joe Biden, frankly, I don't know if Joe even knows most days what he's saying when he squints and screams at the teleprompter. He clearly doesn't understand how to get off the podium and the stage. He wanders around looking for the exit, pointing and asking, how do I get off here? Where do I go? So do I think that he's going to sit down with Republicans and come up with some thoughtful ideas they can agree on? Actually, not a chance.
How confident are you that when Republicans take over the House and Senate, which I think they will as well, that there will be some accountability for Hunter Biden, Anthony Fauci? Do you see any type of, I know that there has been talk about hearings, but do you see any real accountability for the American people?
Gosh, I hope so, because I think if they don't, then the Republicans have a shot at losing what ought to be an easy pickup of the White House in 2024. Republicans have got to deliver. They can't do what they did in 2010, after they got the House back and people were so upset over Obamacare. They came back in and they made a bunch of promises. We're going to repeal Obamacare. And they didn't do anything. Yeah. And if they pull that stunt again, and all they do is want to get invited to the nice cocktail parties in Georgetown and make sure that they make the donor class happy, I think you'll see a lot of people abandon them, and they can't afford that. There's going to have to be a strong stomach for holding Democrats accountable, going back and asking, what did the Department of Justice and the FBI actually know about the Russia hoax? Who was involved? Who lied? Who committed felonies by falsifying information that went to a FISA court? How much money did Hunter Biden get from the Chinese? And by the way, how much of it went to the big guy, Joe himself? These are questions that they're going to have to answer and get answers to. And if they don't, then a pox on all their houses, because we're not sending them up there just to enjoy themselves and to see if they can go jetting around the country at fundraisers with all the swells. They've got to stand and deliver this time.
So let's say the red wave happens on Tuesday. Poll after poll has shown Democrats don't approve of President Biden and would like to see a new face run in 2024. Do you think that Joe Biden will run again in 2024? And if not, who will be the leader of the Democratic Party?
I'm not sure Joe will be capable of running. And I'm not trying to be unkind or mean, but I mean, we're seeing some real issues with his cognitive ability, his inability to put a sentence together and to make sense. And I think that if his family doesn't come and create an intervention, I think there'll be some prominent Democrats who will say, Mr. President, for the sake of the party and in their view, for the sake of the country, I think maybe it would be a good idea for you to be a one-term president and go out on a bang. The question is, who do the Democrats have? It can't be Kamala Harris. She's as incoherent as Joe and John Fetterman. And her word salad speeches are something to behold. They'll be studying them in rhetorical theory classes for decades to come in colleges across the country. So then they've got Hillary, who is as old as dirt and as mean as a junkyard dog. I don't think that's going to fly. So then you're looking at Is there some centrist Democrat governor out there? I don't know. Gavin Newsom will run. He's no centrist. And if the Democrats nominate Gavin Newsom, then I think we have a real shot of running the table in 2024.
Do you think the Democrat Party has progressed so far left that there's no turning back for them? Or do you think there is still an opportunity in this country for a more moderate, partnering voice between parties to be brought forward?
Well, there could be. We saw the Democrats lurch to the left when they nominated Walter Mondale, who promised everyone on national television he would raise their taxes. But I also remind myself that this is not the Democrat Party of our grandfathers or even our fathers. This is a different Democrat Party that is more in line with Bernie Sanders than they are with any of the Kennedys. It's just a different Democrat Party. And you don't see what at least once existed, and that's the Blue Dog Democrats who are pro-Second Amendment, some of them pro-life. Those folks don't exist. They've been drummed out of the party and sent packing. I'd like to think that it's possible that the Democrats could see the error of their ways, and maybe they will. If they ever want to win national elections, they're going to have to come back closer to center because they're so far off the center of the cookie, as one might say, that it's not possible for them to continue to appeal to working class people by suggesting that the people who work are going to make contributions in large measure to people who won't work, create open borders, raise taxes, make it impossible to heat homes and cool them in the summer, and somehow we're supposed to applaud them for that. So one of two things will happen. The Democrats will decreasingly fall off into oblivion, or increasingly fall off into oblivion, or they'll have a day of reckoning, and they'll put someone in their leadership position, much like Bill Clinton, who talked about being the third way, and he was not the far left person. And they had a winning message, and they won with it. I don't know if they got that much sense left in them now. We'll see.
So there's been reports that former President Trump could announce his candidacy for president the day after the election next week. He seems to be inching closer and closer toward it in every rally that he's doing. He's doing one in Iowa, which is not a battleground state, at the end of this week. What do you think the prospects of him are announcing again? And do you think that's a good thing for the Republican Party?
Well, in a way, it would be good to find out, is he going to run or not? Because if he is, then I think a lot of folks step back and say, then I'm not going to, don't want to challenge him. I think if he's not going to run, it's probably a good thing to get that out there as well. But a lot of people may not understand that one of the reasons candidates delay the announcement is because the very moment that they declare candidacy, they immediately subject themselves to all kinds of legal and accounting responsibilities with the Federal Election Commission. It gets expensive, it gets tedious, and the longer that a person can hold off making that announcement, the better off they really are, unless they have to go out early just to say to people, hey, I'm really serious about running, here goes. Donald Trump doesn't have to do that. He's not going to be having to worry about name ID or even raising funds. So it's in his best interest to hold off and to kind of keep everybody guessing, so he does not put himself in that position of having to give all these reports and hiring a room full of attorneys and accountants to file them all.
That's a really good point to remember. So talk briefly about Michelle Obama as a candidate, because of course, she's written a book. There's been whispers for a very long time that she would be the ideal candidate for the Democrats. She says that she never wants to run, but who knows? And how would she fare against Donald Trump?
Well, frankly, I think Michelle Obama could be a very formidable candidate for the Democrats, far more so than Kamala, Hillary. Among the base of the Democrat Party, she's still very highly favored. Now, ask Republicans what they think. Maybe they're not so gung-ho about it. But then again, Republicans aren't going to be that gung-ho about any Democrat. But Michelle Obama would bring something to the table that no other Democrat right now does, and that is that she has a popularity, she has the ability to articulate, she can actually get a full sentence out without somebody going, huh? What does that mean? So there are some advantages. In fact, I listened to Barack Obama this weekend, and I don't agree with what he's saying, and a lot of it was balloon juice and nonsense, and he was talking about how Republicans want to take away Social Security and Medicare, which is an outright lie. So he was blowing smoke out of all of his bodily orifices when he was talking. But I found myself saying, he's a really good speaker and he's still entertaining. And even when he was saying stuff about Republicans, it wasn't true. Quite frankly, just from an observer standpoint, he was entertaining and even funny. And I thought, boy, they don't have anybody who can stand at the podium and at least inspire the crowd, kind of make them feel like that there's hope.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't see anyone else in the Democrat Party who's capable of doing that right now.
So very quickly, Barack Obama is on the campaign trail. He's in Nevada. He's going to go to Arizona. He'll be in Pennsylvania. These battleground states. Do you think that he's going to energize the Democratic base, and will his campaigning make a difference or be the difference maker for Democrats?
No, I don't, because even though he may remind them of the days that they used to win elections, he still can't give an answer as to how come they can't pay their heating bill, why their grocery bill is up almost double, and why it is that 2.5 million people have crossed the border and they can't cross the street without fear of being shot or hit in the back of the head with a brick. So all of the things that Obama can go and do, and he can even scare them about Republicans, but they know what's happening in their own families. And they know when they sit at the dinner table, they're not sure they can really look forward to next week's groceries because they don't know if they can afford it. They're thinking about putting on an extra sweater just to stay warm. So I don't think all the endorsements and appearances by Obama in the world will change what's going to happen next Tuesday. And it's going to be, I truly believe it's going to be historic.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And as we've been saying, it's all about kitchen table issues this election cycle. Thank you so much, Governor.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
All right. Up next is Arizona gubernatorial candidate for the Republicans, Carrie Lake.
Hi,
Carrie, welcome.
good to be with you guys. Hello, good morning.
So we were just talking to Governor Huckabee about kind of the issues that are motivating voters this election cycle. What are you hearing the most of? What are voters most concerned about in the state of Arizona?
Well, I heard a little bit of Governor Huckabee, great guy, admire him greatly. And, every state's dealing with inflation, Bidenflation, because we didn't have to have it this way, but he's been so incompetent that he's working to drive our country into the ground. So we're struggling with that here in Arizona. Everyone is, and that's why we've got a plan to return $500 million to the hardworking tax-paying citizens. We want to make sure that we get rid of grocery tax in Arizona and the rental tax that people pay on their homes and apartments. And so we're going to do that. But our border is a huge issue here, and it's a huge issue in all of the states because a wide open border in Arizona means that fentanyl is pouring into every single state, killing young people. Number one cause of death for 18 to 45 right now is drug overdoses. I don't even call them overdoses, they're poisoning. So that's why we have a strong policy when it comes to the border. We're going to secure the border. The state is going to take back control of our border in Arizona and restore order and law and order and protect our citizens. And people are also concerned about the homeless crisis we have on our streets. With the street homelessness up, the population growing, we don't want to become San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, and LA. And so I have a plan to combat that, get people help, and restore quality of life for the hardworking, tax-paying citizens. And we also have concerns about education and what they're teaching our children in school. Lots of big issues, and we are working on all of them.
So the political climate right now is divisive, to put it lightly. And I'm just curious, when you become governor in Arizona, which I expect you will be, what issues can you bring to the table that will sort of unite Arizona without compromising Republican conservative principles?
I frankly think all of my issues, all of our ideas are for all Arizonans. Look, I don't know any um, Democrat who wants to see their children get their hands on fentanyl. I don't know any Democrat who wants the cartels in control of our border. I don't know any Democrat who wants their kids to be indoctrinated. Well, maybe Katie Hobbs, my opponent, wants that. I know that all voters want to make sure we're looking at the water situation in Arizona and taking charge on that front. I know all Arizonans, whether they're Democrat or Republican, want to make sure that we are helping people ease some of the pain with the inflation. So, frankly, I think all of our policies will help Arizonans. They're common sense policies.
So, Carrie, the mainstream media has labeled you a radical. Yahoo ran an article saying that questioning if you're the most dangerous politician in America. The LA Times out today is saying that democracy is tested in Arizona by a slate of election deniers. I know that I was watching John Carl and ABC this week, a few weekends ago, and their entire program was on election deniers and the threat to democracy. How has this impacted your campaign, and what will you do to restore election integrity in the state of Arizona?
No one's listening to the mainstream media. They have become almost completely irrelevant, and they're in a panic because they know that I'm going to get in office and do what I say I'm going to do. And that means the jig is up for them. And so I'm not worried about their headlines. Nobody's reading these papers. They're completely worthless. And it shows you that they're afraid of me. You know, they went after President Trump for 7 years. For 7 years, they attacked him. And they said, we got to get rid of him. He's too abrasive. His tweets are offensive. His policies were fine, but orange man bad, all of that garbage. And now they have me, and I love President Trump. I love his policies. I respect him immensely. And we're putting those same policies forward in Arizona, and they are in a panic. They don't know how to attack me. They can't attack me because of my Twitter. They can't attack me because of the color of my skin. They can't say that I'm too brash or I can't communicate properly. And so they're throwing everything they can, seeing what will stick. And none of it's sticking because the people know I've got a common sense approach to solving the problems that we've had for years. And no politician has come in to solve them yet. I think it's just desperation. The people of Arizona know me. I've been in their homes for 27 years as a trusted voice in the good times and the bad. I've brought them the news. I walked away from my news career because it had become propaganda and I wasn't willing to lie to the people. And they recruited me to run. And I think the mainstream media is in a complete panic because they're having a hard time finding a way to attack me. The real threat to democracy and the real threat to our republic is the mainstream media trying to take away our most precious freedom, our freedom of speech. And if we don't have the ability to question our government and to question elections when things are going wrong, that is a threat to democracy. And I will never give up my freedom of speech to a bunch of propagandist hacks in the mainstream media who are trying to destroy this country.
And we saw for over 2 years under the coronavirus lockdowns and restrictions that the media really did run with the hysteria to carry the water of the Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates types of I am science type of agenda. And I'm just curious, if you were in the executive position at the time, what would you have done differently with the coronavirus? And looking ahead, if this next pandemic materializes as some on the left are predicting, what would you do differently?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you. I don't know if it's a mic situation, but I think you're asking how I would have handled COVID. Is that right?
How would you have handled COVID? And if another pandemic is on the horizon, how would you handle it in the future?
Well, I think the governor who handled it best was Governor Kristi Noem. And she basically said, hey, here's what we know. Let me lay it out for you. These are some of the recommendations of how you could protect yourself if you choose to. Now that you know this, you go out and decide how the best approach for your health, your family's health, your business. She didn't shut the schools down. She didn't mask up everybody. She let the people decide. And that's what we will do. We will never shut down our state again because of Anthony Fauci, the CDC, and what they're telling us to do. We'll take their advice. We'll look at it. We will actually bring some real science in. and we will approach it with that direction. But we will never shut down your business. The government shouldn't shut down your business. We will never shut down churches again. We're never going to mask our children. And we're going to give people the freedom to make their own health choices and get back their medical freedom and medical privacy.
In terms of the border, just kind of going back to that issue, I mean, there is an invasion on our southern border, and Arizona is hugely, as a border state, is hugely impacted by this. But it's a federal issue, right? And the Biden administration is doing nothing. They're actually taking Arizona to court right now for having shipping containers as a makeshift wall on the border. What is your plan to secure the border, and what, as a governor, can you do given the limitations from the Biden administration?
My plan is called Defend Arizona. It is the most bold, aggressive border plan we've ever seen in our country's history. And frankly, we need a bold, aggressive plan because our border is being overrun by narco terrorists who are importing the most deadly drug we've ever seen in this country, fentanyl. It's pouring through Arizona. Arizona has become a pipeline for this drug, and it's killing our young people. Nearly 3,000 Arizonans died from it last year alone. I have talked to so many moms and dads who've lost a 17-year-old, 19-year-old son or daughter, 20-year-old son or daughter, and I am going to do everything in my power to stop these cartels from having control of our border. It is the state's right to protect their citizens and protect their people from an invasion. And that's what we have. We are going to invoke that right in the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, on day one, hour one of my administration. And we are going to take back control of our border. And they can fight us all they want. We'll go right to the Supreme Court because it's right there in black and white in the United States Constitution. We will no longer allow the cartels to control our border. Joe Biden is working on the side of the cartels. And that's not hyperbole. By allowing our border to be wide open, by inviting the world to come across illegally, he has made this country a lawless and most dangerous country right now, especially in parts of Arizona where we have the cartels running the show. And we're not going to let that happen. Arizona is the Grand Canyon state. We're not going to be known as the fentanyl pipeline state. And as long as Joe Biden's in office and doesn't care about the safety of America, the sovereignty of our states, we will take control of the border. And we welcome the fight, we welcome the challenge, and we've got a plan for it.
One of the biggest lies that the left has been able to sell through the years is the idea that founding fathers wanted a complete separation of church and state. And in a nation where your rights are supposed to come from God and government's only there to protect those rights, that's a dangerous path. So I'm curious if you could talk about how your own faith guides your politics.
Well, I think that we need to put people who have a strong moral compass in office. I mean, we've got to have, human beings are flawed. And when you're making decisions as an elected official, you can lean on advisors that you trust. You can lean on the people, but when it comes right down to it, we've got to have a moral compass and know right from wrong. And I think I heard a Reagan quote where he said, basically, I tell my people around me, never come to me with a problem and your solution is based on the effects of what that decision would be politically for me. I don't care about political ramifications. I care about doing what's right and what's wrong. And that's exactly how I feel. That's how I've been running my campaign. We are about speaking about what are the true issues and true solutions and what's right and wrong. And I think that's the sign of a good leader, and one who has a connection and a faith in God is very important, especially in the times we're in right now.
Yeah. So President Trump has come to Arizona, has done several rallies on your behalf. And, you represent the America First movement, really, with your policies that you're setting forth. How impactful was his endorsement? And is Arizona a truly MAGA state, or some Republicans are saying it's more of a purple state now, and the impact of his endorsement doesn't mean much?
His endorsement's huge. I love President Trump. I loved him as a president. I loved him even before he was a president. I thought he was great at everything he's done. He's been successful in. And I've become a good friend with him. I'm really, I really love the friendship that we have and that we've established since he gave me that great endorsement. His endorsement is the most powerful endorsement in the history of politics in this country. And I mean, short of getting Abraham Lincoln to endorse you, which is impossible, I think President Trump's endorsement is pretty big. But more importantly, he's a good man. He gave up a lot for this country, much like our founding fathers gave up a lot. We need people who are willing to set aside their selfish interests right now and save this republic. And that's what I was willing to do when I jumped in. I walked away from my career. I walked away from, great benefits, a huge paycheck, because what good is all of that if we're losing our country?
Mhm.
What good is all of that if we don't have freedom for our children and opportunity? And so it is time for all of us to grow up and step in and try to save this country. I think we're at the 11th hour, maybe in the final minutes. This election is so important. We have to get out and vote. We have to go knock doors. We have to make sure our friends are voting. And we have to save this country from the radicals who have taken over the Democrat Party. This is not the Democrat Party of yesteryear.
Yeah.
This is a group of radical Marxists who have taken over our Democrat Party and driven it into the far left. When I say Marxists, I mean it.
Yeah.
They want to turn us into a communist country. And they want to call people like me radical, right wing. We haven't changed. We're the same conservatives we've always been. We are a common sense party with common sense solutions from a foundation of where our country was founded. Basic freedoms we want to restore. And the left is trying to say we're radical, that we've gone too far right. We haven't moved. They've gone to the communist side. And so we're going to stop that. And people are with us. We have a movement. We're going to vote like our lives depend on it on November 8th. And we're going to win and restore some sanity to Arizona and secure this state. And I think we will, I think what we do here will spread in other states as well.
So before we let you go, I want to be respectful of your time, but there's been a lot of speculation that you could be a vice presidential pick for Donald Trump if he chooses to announce again. What do you say about those rumors?
I find it humorous because the mainstream media spent, I've been campaigning for over 500 days. The mainstream media spent about 300 of those days saying, what qualifications do you have? How dare you run for office? What do you know? And now they're in a panic. That didn't stop me. And they're in a panic saying, well, you're just going to leave and be President Trump's vice president. I've never had that discussion with President Trump. I am solely focused on the state that I love, Arizona. And my answer to the fake news is not only am I going to be governor, I'm going to be governor for 2 terms, and I'm going to make your life miserable in the fake news for 8 years. So get used to it. We're going to turn things around and have a great free state, and everyone's going to look to Arizona and say, we want to do exactly what Arizona is doing.
Well, Carrie, thanks so much for your time and best of luck. And everyone out there, get out and vote. If you're in the state of Arizona, get out there and vote on Tuesday.
That's right. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
All right. Well, I think she's going to pull it out. Now, there was a New York Times Siena poll that came out yesterday that had the race between her and Katie Hobbs tied, basically 48 to 48%. But I believe that's an outsider poll. That's an outlier. There's some some state polls that have her up 12 points. So she's just so refreshing to talk to, and she is, I think, a rising star within the Republican Party.
Without a doubt. And I'm glad you brought up that question, because I was going to ask her intent if she were to be asked to be a vice president. Because of course, if you go through the trouble of voting for a governor that you truly believe in, you want that governor to stay put, at least for the length of most, if not all, of the term. So it's a good thing that she said she's going to stay.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think we feel that with Glenn Youngkin, because there's also been rumors that he has his eye on 2024 and might throw his hat in the ring. And my first response to that is no, you got to stay in Virginia. You got to do the work that we elected you to do here, and turn it from a purple or a blue state more into a red one with our values, and protect our children and the education, and get the CRT out of the schools and the gender affirming baloney out of our schools, and give parents back the right. Yes. And that is something that he campaigned on, and he's making progress toward, but he is not yet he has not yet finished the job, Cheryl.
Right, and I think the correct game plan is Donald Trump 2024, and then Ron DeSantis for the next 8 years.
Yes.
And then we can consider other candidates after
Yes,
that.
but the question remains, who will be Donald Trump's running mate?
I don't know. Maybe you.
All right, so speaking of, let's take a deeper dive into some of these polls.
Okay.
We have Robert Cahaly from Trafalgar. Sorry, I've been all afternoon here. But Robert, thanks so much for joining us. I'd like your top line takeaways. What do you think about the House? What do you think about the Senate? And what races do you think are the tightest going into November? Oh, I think you might be on mute. Hold on. Oh, can't hear you. Stay with us for a second. We're going to play around with the audio.
Well, it's good to have him on because out of all the pollsters out there, he's definitely one of the most accurate ones.
Yes.
But, all these other pollsters out there constantly fail.
Oh, we had him and then we lost him again. No, I mean, his group was, I think, the only pollster that called in 2016 that said that Trump had a shot. Everyone else said that it was less than a certain amount. They had no shot at all.
Yes.
And so the accuracy was great. All right. Can we try Robert again?
So one of the things that's so interesting about the polls, though, is that even though they constantly fail outside of Trafalgar, of course,
Yes.
they keep trying and they keep putting forward the same type of numbers that always show Democrats winning up until the very last minute, up until the Republican candidate wins. And then they do a mea culpa the next day, and then it's back to business as normal as the next election campaign gears up.
Well, there seems to be no accountability within the polling industry.
Yes.
And I think that there's a difference between polls that campaigns pay for themselves, because that's the private free market, right? And if you call it wrong for the candidate, you get fired. But then there's these media polls by the New York Times, polls by USA Today, that are weighted differently and might actually try to get a certain outcome, to be dishonest, to suppress people from going to the actual voting booth because they think that a contest is lost. I mean, do you share that opinion that like some of these polls are suppression polls?
Absolutely. And, that's not just opinion. I've actually looked beyond the headlines and beyond the Twitter, statements that get put out about certain polls. And I've gone to the actual polls themselves, looked at the questions, looked at the findings. And in many instances, what is being put out there is the takeaway headline is nowhere in the poll.
Yeah.
So you really have to dig deep and do your own due diligence with these polls to find out which ones you can trust versus which ones you cannot. And 99% of the time, I find you can't trust them.
Well, I mean, and Robert has talked about this and tweeted about it, is kind of the hidden Trump voter, right? That's what all the pollsters blamed for their miss in 2016, is that we just can't get Trump voters on the phone and or to admit that they support him. Now, with Joe Biden coming out and calling half of America semi-fascists, do you think that it leads to more of a hidden Republican voter that might be concerned about replying to these polls or replying to these pollsters?
Don't you?
I'm proud to be a semi-fascist MAGA Republican.
You're one of the few who wear the t-shirt
Yes.
and the hat
Yes.
and go out shopping. Right?
Yeah, I do.
In a far left district. But for most Americans, they read the headlines about, on a subway, a guy attacked for wearing a MAGA hat.
Yeah.
Or they read headlines about violence coming out of the Democrat Party or the left and Antifa, Black Lives Matter. And who wants to answer the phone and give a truthful opinion about their conservative leanings? Why? What's the incentive there? It's so much easier to say no comment or just hang up.
Yeah. No, and I think when it comes to this New York Times poll that came out yesterday was an outlier on all the races. It basically said that Democrats and Republicans were about even, that we were still in the race and that Republicans are picking up. I mean, Democrats are picking up steam heading into Tuesday, but it's literally the only poll out of a bevy of polls that show the most important issues to Americans and to voters and to likely voters are the economy, crime, inflation, open border, and on all of those issues, Republicans win. They trust Republicans to handle all of those issues more. Now, if your top concern is abortion or threats to democracy, right, then you're going to vote for Democrats. But the bottom line is those things just aren't breaking through. And where the issues that are the most important issues to voters are the issues that they trust Republicans more on.
Right, and that's the significant common sense approach to looking at all these polls, right? It's not just the numbers, and I call that the wishful thinking poll,
Yeah.
when you just said about the New York Times, because that's all it is,
Yeah.
really. And the other thing about polls is that you have to remember they're just a snapshot in time, right?
Yep.
What people say that particular day, in that particular moment in time, may not be what carries them in, in terms of voting at the election box. So a lot of these polls they start out early and they find in favor of Democrats because conservatives aren't really thinking about those issues except as it affects them. They're not really taking the time out to talk with pollsters.
And I think that we saw that this summer. There was a lot of headlines this summer that abortion is going to propel Democrats in November, that it's motivating their voters, that it's more of an issue, and Republicans are falling behind. But I don't think Republicans were ever falling behind. I think that issue reached saturation, right? The people who are going to care about it are going to care about it, but it's only a limited amount of people who care about that more than they do, going to the grocery store or filling up their tank. As I've said before, women go to the grocery store more often than they go to the abortion clinic. And Republicans really weren't paying it in August. Everyone's off on vacation. You're doing your own thing. You're not tuned in. And now people are starting to pay attention to the issues. And on the issues that matter, Republicans are winning.
So then you have to ask why. Why did Democrats keep talking up abortion rights, and taxpayer-funded abortion access if you're in the military and so forth, and things like climate change and equity and social justice, when they can see these same polls themselves?
Yeah, I know.
Americans don't want this as their number one concern. And it has to come back to money. I suspect that Democrats do an awful lot of fundraising from their very liberal, very wealthy donors when they talk up abortion and so forth, and keep that alive in the headlines.
All right. I think we've got Robert ready now, hopefully with the audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Success, success. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right. Well, you're doing a poll a day, basically, or on several different states and different races. You're a busy man, so we appreciate your time. What do you think the state of the race looks like right now in terms of your prognostications for both the House and the Senate?
Yeah, I would say right now you are looking at a House that probably goes significantly. The Republicans pick up 35.
35.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the boldest. That's the boldest I've heard so far. I've heard people estimate anywhere from 22 to 30, but 35 is just what's changing in the race that's kind of leading you to say 35.
Well, I've been a believer, and many of you've looked and seen what we put out there for the last little bit, that there's a significant amount of votes that people aren't being able to measure. And you were talking about this earlier. Yeah. There's just a lot of people who just refuse to take polls. In 2016, they were shy. In 2020, they were just hesitant to take a poll. But in 2020, we call them submerged. And these are Republicans who just will not, for whatever reason, participate. I mean, whether it's what Biden said, I mean, they just feel like that their government is possibly using polls to make lists of MAGA Republicans for later use. We've had a lot of strange things happen. People report that they're getting our polls, but they're worried that it's not really us. And every time that's been reported, it actually was us. But I can understand a certain level of skepticism that these things might be vehicles by which a list is built up of. And if people feel that way, it doesn't matter whether they're right or wrong. They feel that way. And so they're not taking them at all. And so I've said for about 2 months that I think every poll will underestimate Republican turnout, including ours. And so this submerged vote, I would say, could be anywhere from 1.5 to 5.
Wow.
And so there's really no way of measuring it. And that's why, the best we can do is guesstimate it based on the anecdotal evidence we've picked up. But I think that we could be looking at a lot of these seats that are on there. So, like I've said for a while, I think it could be very well 25 to 30 and, even 35. So I would say that's the range. But I expect it's going to be a big turnout and of Republicans. The energy I see tells me that we could be looking at the 35 number very well. And the Senate, I'd say at least 52, quite possibly 53 U.S. senators pick up is quite possibly what we're looking at. Yeah.
Robert, if you're an average American and you're watching these polls that come out daily, there's a barrage of polls in your email box, on the news, and so forth. What are some of the tips that you can give people about the biggest deceptions, the biggest lies that polls are able to bring forward, whether we're talking about pollsters or the media or a combination of both? What are the red flags?
Well, one of the things I would also always look at is the error rate, the average error rate. There are a lot of charts you can find out there about 2020 average error rate. And that's the average rate.
I don't have audio.
I don't have audio.
The monitor go away all of a sudden.
Is Robert still?
You know what? I really wanted to hear the answer to that. So when he comes back on, if you don't mind, can we start there?
All right, we're having some technical issues again.
Do we have you, Robert?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
I
can hear
can
you
hear
now.
you.
Sorry,
Okay.
we both just lost our audio.
Can you just start at the beginning and answer that question? Red flags for poll deceptions?
Okay, yeah. What I would be looking for, kind of telltale signs that you could be looking at polls that are not, you shouldn't rely on, is, one of the simplest things is to go back and look at the 2020 average error rate. Error rate is when you calculate the difference between what a group predicts is going to be the margin between the two candidates, what it actually is. Most of the polling companies out there that polled a lot of the, that polled a large number of states have a horrible error rate, 3 or 4%.
Yeah.
We have maintained an error rate of under 2.5 since 2016. And in our polls that come out in anticipation of election, the ones they measure in the last 10 days or so. And so that's a pretty good indicator. Now, there aren't a lot of polls this year. And part of the reason is that's a test that a lot of these companies don't like to fail. And they failed royally in 2020, and they failed royally in 2018 and 2016. So the other thing I would look to, though, if you can't find an error rate chart, is look at how many questions they ask. And when you see these ones that are asking 20 or 30 questions, average people aren't taking them. Other things to look for is how big the sample size is. We believe in 1,000 per state. So when you see these ones that are 400 or 500 for an entire state, that's not very effective. That's not a really good way to poll things. And then look at how many methods they use for collection. And so first of all, anything that says an online panel, you can dismiss that immediately, because you got to be really weird to be on an online panel, not average people. And I'm all about polling average people. And if they're just one method, like all live callers, I always say, how many normal Gen Zs and millennials are they talking to that answer a phone from somebody they don't recognize and then talk to them and answer 30 questions? The answer is 0.
Okay. We're going to pull up your latest round of polling. So you have the Washington Senate, where you have Tiffany Smiley. No one's really been talking about this Washington senatorial race because it was thought that incumbent Patty Murray would run away with it. But look at here, you have Patty Murray at 49.4% and Tiffany Smiley within 48.2%. So I presume that is within the margin of error and within striking distance for Tiffany Smiley. The Georgia Senate, you've got Herschel Walker beating Raphael Warnock that is by a larger margin than most other polls.
Actually not.
Okay.
The only poll that it's more than is every poll that came out after the debate, with the exception of New York Times Siena, which
yes, what is that we were talking about that too, because that just came out yesterday, and it's mind blowing. It seems like an outlier.
Well, first of all, I think if you use a general formula with them and you add 5 points to the Republican and subtract from the Democrat, that's kind of where the truth is with those guys. Okay. One of the things that we found is we talk about polls designed to reflect versus affect the electorate. This is more of an affect the electorate. These are the same people who also told you a week or so ago, that the Siena told you that 18% of independent women have swung toward the GOP in the last 2 months. 18% of people don't swing anywhere in 2 months. That's not reasonable. What is reasonable is that there's been a pump and dump going on, and that is in August and September. There were a lot of polls that weren't accurate. They were designed to help the Democrats raise money and designed to get the attention of those in Silicon Valley and Wall Street and Hollywood, that now that we're getting close to the election, they got to get a little more closer to the truth, which I think is what's more likely going on. But the polls that have the great track record in Georgia, for example, since the debate, you have Landmark has a long history in Georgia. Dead even, the one from Matt Towery with Insider Advantage, who has equal to us #1 record in Georgia, and I believe Matt has her split up more than we did, and I think maybe 3 we had a 2.5, and I think Rasmussen also has a good record in Georgia, has Herschel up by 5. So the ones with a good record in Georgia all show positive or net even with Walker, and the one with the higher error rate, who very rarely gets stuff right in Georgia, is the one that's the outlier.
Lee Zeldin and the New York race, is that all about crime? Is that what is pushing him ahead in the polls?
There are 2 things that are at play at that one, and we're going to elaborate a little bit on this a little later today. So I'm going to give you guys a tweak to something that we're going to put out in an hour or so. 2 things, and this was a supposition until we did this poll. First, crime, certainly biggest issue in New York, compared to the other states where crime is #2 and New York's #1. Something else, though, we started picking up. A lot of people kept talking about Cuomo. I'm for Zeldin, but I really like Cuomo. I think Cuomo would do better than Hochul. So we asked people, if the election today were between Cuomo and Zeldin, how would you vote? And the same people that give Zeldin an advantage of right at 1.8, give, if it were Cuomo on the ballot, it would be 55-45 Cuomo. So as we thought, there are a lot of people who, and then asked Cuomo who did better, Cuomo or Hochul, and those numbers were like 60-40 Cuomo. So there are a lot of folks out there who are Cuomo supporters. Maybe they wanted to make a comeback, whatever it is, who are very upset, who are voting for Zeldin because they're very disappointed at what happened to Cuomo, and they think he would have done a better job. And they think if those people, what they're telling us is the choice between Zeldin and Cuomo today, they'd be picking Cuomo. So I think that there are a lot of Cuomo voters that make up the Zeldin coalition, and frankly, I don't think Lee Zeldin minds having those people on his side.
No. Going to the Nevada Senate race, Adam Lexall, you have beating incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto. What are the issues in Nevada, and is it all about the Hispanic vote?
Well, issues are same, a lot of the same issues, the economy. But the other thing about Nevada, there's a lot of frustrated people in Nevada. A lot of these people in Nevada are in the service industry. They're working, some of them cash, some of them tip paid jobs. That make a significant amount of money with tips. So a couple things that hit them really hard. COVID was devastating to them. They were, a lot of these people, who work hard for a living, weren't able to, because of all the restrictions, they weren't able to work as much as they wanted to. And now we know that some of the restrictions weren't the same on casinos, but a lot of the things that are also not just casinos. A lot of these other industries depend on these service jobs. So they were hit hard by COVID. Now, with this IRS basically going to have to raise all this money with these new agents, everyone knows that, especially even the budget office scored it, that they've got to go out under people who make under $400,000 a year. So that's your cash and your chips and your Uber drivers, and a lot of people that live in Nevada and depend those are now going to have the IRS after them. Add to that the fact that Hispanics are leaving the Democrat Party because the Democrat social agenda is so far away from their beliefs and their strong faith. You kind of create a perfect storm for Republicans to do really well there. Laxalt's a well-known name, and Mastro voted for the IRS agent, voted for the spending that hurt the economy, and did nothing to work against the COVID restrictions that have been such a problem to these service industry workers. So not surprising to me.
I have one final question, and this is about New Hampshire. Polling out of New Hampshire in the senatorial race has been all over the map. Can pollsters accurately poll New Hampshire, and is it in play for the Republicans?
No question my mind is in play, and I'll tell you the most important reason I think that is 3 months before the Republican primary that was divisive, both candidates, both Bolduc and Morse, were winning that race and beating Hassan. So by more than 3 points. So if the Republicans come back together after a primary, because remember, our last poll, I think we had it 3 points. I think Matt Tower, the Inside Advantage last poll, had it at 1 point. It was just a matter of Republicans coming back together. I mean, but, just even this weekend on Meet the Press, Governor Sununu did not get along with at all with General Bolduc. He said, "Hey, I'm supporting the ticket. I'm supporting him." Even when he got, Chuck Todd jumped all over him about, well, how can you support Bolduc? He said, "Hey, these issues that you think are guiding people's votes are not, and the issues that are guiding them are the kind that they're going to replace Hassan. People want Bolduc." And so, yeah, absolutely. I think this thing is in play. I think there's a lot of people who wrote him off. But this guy's built a grassroots network. And what's important, there's very little early vote in New Hampshire. So this thing is playing out toward the very end. Bolduc is finishing very strong. And, even though a lot of the national establishment money has left, there's a lot of other money there. And frankly, Bolduc's built a great machine on the ground. So I think the general I think he's likely going to surprise people in that race. Yeah.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry about the technical issues there at the start. We appreciate your expertise, and we will be following your polls leading up into Election Day.
Thanks, Robert.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that concludes our podcast, Countdown to the Midterms. Thank you to all the Washington Times subscribers who joined us this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your support, and get out and vote next Tuesday.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.